It is not time for the final round of World Cup qualification just yet, but that doesn't mean that we can't do any speculation regarding who Dragan Skocic will call up for Iran's upcoming World Cup qualifiers. Will there be any surprise call-ups? You know the deal, and you know what time it is. It's time for Team Melli Talk. Plenty of positive vibes and positive energy for our members of the national team of Iran as they prepare for the final round of World Cup qualification. Dragan Skocic has got a lot of work to do as Iran prepares to face Syria and Iraq to start off the final round of World Cup qualification. We'll be breaking down each position and making predictions for which players will be called up by Dragan Skocic. Let's get right to it. Not a surprise to start off with the goalkeepers, and when talking about Iran's goalkeepers, these are very exciting times, and it's also very easy to make predictions because currently all three Iranian keepers are playing in Europe. Very exciting. Let's take a look. Alireza Bayramvan recently signing with Boa Vista in Portugal. Amir Abedzadeh actually left Portugal to go to the second division of Spain to play with Ponferradina. Paykan Niazman signing with Portimonense in the Portuguese Primeira Liga. Like I said, very exciting times, but this also means there's hardly any speculation to do. We know that Bayramvan, Abedzadeh, and Niazman will be called up to Iran for these upcoming World Cup qualifiers. Let's move to the next position. Next for the center backs, first let's take a look at the four players that were called up at the center back position for Iran's four crucial World Cup qualifiers that took place in June. Morteza Pouraliganji, Majid Hosseini, Shoja Khalilzadeh, and Hossein Kanani. But when looking back at this list, we need to realize something, and that is Morteza Pouraliganji recently came down with a torn ACL, a huge loss for Iran, and of course, we wish Morteza a speedy recovery. But with one player going down, that means another center back needs to be called up to fill in that void on the bench. So let's take a look at these four possible center backs that could be called up. Two center backs from Esteghlal in Aref Golami and Hossein Moradmand. Then we have Aref Agassi of Fulad and Ryan Tafazoli of Wickham in England. Now, to be honest, from my point of view, despite all the rumors, I don't see Dragan Skocic as being one of those coaches that's going to go out of his way to try and get Ryan Tafazoli called up to Iran. I don't see it happening, so just going to move past that. And as for my choice as to who I would call up to fill in that void at center back, I know Aref Golami has been called up to Iran before. He's younger, but I got to go with experience on this one in Hossein Moradmand. Yes, he is 28 years old, but he's had a good season with Esteghlal. He has a habit of scoring goals in the last moments of matches, and he also had some very good seasons with Padideh prior to signing with Esteghlal. So like I said, my choice, Hossein Moradmand. Now for the wingbacks. And before going to those list of wingbacks that were called up in Iran's previous qualifiers, let's take a look at the possible call-ups first. Plenty of experience in Vuria Ghafouri of Esteghlal and Ramin Rezaian of Al Sailiya in Qatar. We also cannot forget Saleh Hardani of Fulad. Next, let's take a look at the list of players that were called up for Iran's previous qualifiers at the wingback position. Sadegh Moharrami, Milad Mohammadi, Jafar Salmani, and Daniel Ismaili Far. Now, to be honest, I really like all three of these right backs in Ghafouri, Hardani, and Rezaian. I mean, Ghafouri and Rezaian bring plenty of experience to Iran, and we know Rezaian is very good with set pieces. Hardani, he's basically more of like an honorable mention. I think he'll get more opportunities in the future. But to be honest, at the end of the day, out of all these players, I think Iran should be more patient and give more opportunities to Daniel Ismaili Far of Sepahan. He was called up previously for Iran, and I like what he brings to the pitch. He's very good with Sepahan as a defender, and he's always involved in a lot of attacks, and he's a great distributor of the ball. He also has a good killer instinct as well with scoring goals. I think he deserves a shot to compete with Sadegh Moharrami for the starting right back position. You notice I did not talk about calling up a left back, and my reasoning is that I actually think Jafar Salmani of Portimonense probably won't be called up, and that would leave Milad Mohammadi as the only left back on the roster according to a list. But let's remember that Ehsan Hajsafi is basically a utility player who can also play at the left back position, and to be honest, that's his more normal position to begin with instead of playing midfielder. And let's not forget about Vahid Amiri. He also filled in at left back in the previous round of qualifying. So having said all that, I could see Jafar Salmani not getting called up, and that would basically give Dragan Skocic that luxury of not having to call up 2 left backs and 2 right backs, and instead using perhaps another spot for calling up maybe another striker or an attacking midfielder. Time to break down the midfielders. Of course, this is a position of very huge importance for Iran, whether we're talking about holding defensive midfielders or box-to-box central midfielders. First, let's take a look at the list of players that were called up previously. Saeed Izzatullahi, Ehsan Haj Safi, Ahmad Nurullahi, Vahid Amiri, and Milad Sarlak. Now, to be honest, a lot of Perspolis there. Don't get me wrong, I think this is a good list of midfielders, but out of all these players, I've got to say that Milad Sarlak is the one with the highest probability of being excluded from this list. And having said that, we got to take a look at the possible replacements. First, Omid Ibrahimi of Al Wakra in Qatar, and Ali Karimi, who recently signed with Kayserispor in the Turkish Super League. Now, from my point of view, I like both of these midfielders very much. I think they're great players. But if I have to choose just one of them, it's got to be Omid Ibrahimi. He's always brought plenty of experience to the pitch for Iran. And like I said earlier, whether it's a defensive midfielder or box-to-box central midfielder, this is a very crucial position for Team Melli. And Dragan Skocic has got to make the right decision in bringing back Omid Ibrahimi, because as we remember in the previous round of qualifying for those final 4 matches against Hong Kong, Bahrain, Cambodia, and Iraq, Omid Ibrahimi was not called up to Iran, and a lot of Iranian football fans were not very thrilled. So this time around, I would love to see Omid Ibrahimi make his return to Team Melli. We all know that phrase, your best defense is a very good offense. Now, when taking a look at these wingers and attacking midfielders that Dragan Skocic called up for Iran's previous round of qualifying, let's take a look with Ali Reza Jahanbash, Saman Godus, Ali Golizadeh, Mehdi Gaidi, and Mehdi Torabi. Now, to be honest, with these players, this is a really tough decision for Dragan Skocic to make. But once again, if there is going to be one player that will not make this list, it's got to be Mehdi Torabi in my opinion, because as for the others, I just cannot see them not being called up. It would make no sense. And as for a possible replacement for Mehdi Torabi, let's have a look. Mohammad Mohebi of Sepahan and Mehrdad Mohammadi of Al Arabi. Now first, starting with Mohammad Mohebi, I really like what he brings to the pitch. He's got great pace, he's good at crossing the ball, and he's also a good finisher. He just plays with a lot of heart and a lot of effort. I really have always been a pretty big fan of him. But on the other end, when talking about Mehrdad Mohammadi, yes, he's been playing well with Al Arabi in Qatar, and he actually comes off as a player who's overlooked. And that's kind of surprising to me, because let's not forget that he once had a very good season with Desportivo Aves in Portugal. Between these two players, once again, another tough decision, but I want to go with more experience. I would love to see Mehrdad Mohammadi called up to replace Mehdi Torabi if Dragan Skocic does choose to make a few changes with this position of wingers or attacking midfielders. Last but not least, our forwards, strikers, poachers, whatever you want to call them. Let's take a look. Sardar Azmoun, Mehdi Tarmi, Karim Ansari Fard, and Kaveh Rezai were the 4 players that were called up in Iran's previous round of qualifiers for those 4 crucial matches like I mentioned before. Now, when talking about these 4 players, we know Sardar Azmoun and Mehdi Tarmi are obviously going to be called up. No debate there. But what about maybe perhaps there could be some really big competition between Karim Ansari Fard and Kaveh Rezai? Because now we got to take a look at those alternate forwards or strikers that could be called up. And those players are Alayar Sayed Manesh of Zorya Luhansk in Ukraine, Mehdi Abdi of Perspolis, and Sajad Shabazadeh of Sepahan. First, let's take a look at some highlights. Mehdi Abdi with a very good season with Perspolis, scoring 9 goals. He is only 22 years old, plenty of upside for the future for Iran. But of course, at the same time, remember, lots of depth at this position Not easy to be called up as a striker right now when Iran has so much firepower and offense. And as for the other player from the Iran Pro League, have to show some respect for Sajjad Shahbazadeh. Yes, he's 31 years old. Not very likely that he will ever play for Team Melli, but he was the top scorer of the Iranian Pro League this past season with 20 goals for Sepahan. He was just a monster. Obviously, I had no choice but to show him some respect and show him some support. But at the end of the day, out of these three players, if there's going to be one of them to get called up and possibly replace Ansari Fard or Rezai, it's got to be Alayar Sayadmanesh. He's been doing great things with Zorya Luhansk in the Ukrainian Premier League. And for the previous round of qualifying, for those last 4 matches, he was actually injured. So this time around, if he's healthy, I think we'll definitely see him getting called up to Team Melli. Now to finish off this edition of Team Melli Talk, I'm going to make things short and sweet with my final thoughts. And that is, I don't expect Dragan Skocic to be, very risky with the players he's going to call up. I don't see him making a lot of surprise call-ups, to be honest. And I think the list of players for this 23-man squad is going to be very similar to what we saw for those 4 final qualifiers in the previous round of World Cup qualification. Now, what about you? Are there some Iranian footballers you think I overlooked that should be called up or should be considered for a call-up? Maybe you know about a diamond in the rough. Leave a comment down below. Always looking forward to getting your input. And that is it, everybody, for this edition of Team Melli Talk. As always, really do appreciate the support. Make sure you get to our website, www.teammellitalk.com. Remember, this is your best source for the latest news on Team Melli, the national team of Iran. Make sure you find us on social media. You know the handle, at Team Melli Talk. We're on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. Don't forget to like, comment, share, subscribe. Hit that notification button. See you on the next edition of Team Melli Talk.